about cultural transformation in the greenhouse home. So here's a reality, I'm sure not a shock probably to all of you on the call. We've got some changing demographics. The world is aging. When you look at where we are in the United States, and I found this graphic on the left-hand side of your screen, when you look at the change in number of Americans by age through a 20-year period of time, this goes through 2020, you can see the significant increase, the 73% in the 55 to 64-year-olds and the 54% increase in 65 plus. That's that area that we affectionately call the boomers, of which I am a part. On the right, the population is aging. It shows you the ramifications to the number of workers per Social Security retiree. So going in 1950 from a 16-to-1 ratio to 2035, a 2-to-1 ratio. Let's take a look at Alzheimer's. We've got about 5.5 million people living with Alzheimer's disease in our country. They are saying by 2050, that number could be as much as 16 million. On the upper right side of this graphic, you will see that the costs go from 253 billion to 1.1 trillion by 2050. So I can tell you that government budgets are going to be stretched. They're going to be looking for ways to make cuts in Medicaid, Medicare funding. We've all heard about healthcare reform over the last few years, and I can tell you entitlement reform, healthcare reform is probably in our future. Not to mention the workforce crisis that is looming for all of us. So no matter how you take a look at the future in looking at trends, and I can tell you, I do a lot of reading about what is projected, and this webinar is not to really go deeply into what those trends are, but what I can tell you is that we need to find a model that will improve quality while lowering cost and meeting consumer expectations. So here's where we are today. We've got currently about 15,000 nursing homes in operation. And as you know, most of them were built between 1966 and 1975 with the creation of government programs, Medicare and Medicaid, which offered funding for nursing homes. As you also are probably aware that they were modeled after the hospital and really built to be designed to get the maximum institutional efficiency. The focus was all on how can we be more efficient with the work that we are doing. And I think the other thing was that it was all focused on the task and very little upon who the recipient of care, the elder, was. So is it no wonder that aging adults, including my parents, my loved ones, are saying, whatever happens, please don't send me there. So I'm going to start with this slide and we'll end with this slide. But to use a quote by Maya Angelou, we did the best we could with what we knew, and when we knew better, we did better. I happen to be a nurse who has close to 40 years in my profession working between long-term care environments and home care. I am not here to bash nursing homes or to really be critical of the people who work in them, because as a nurse who devoted a lot of my time, my energy, my passion to making these environments wonderful environments for those that live there and work there, I can tell you that as I've learned more, I have really sought to do better. So let's talk about culture change, because culture change has become, I'd almost call it a movement across the United States. I really find that culture change has its roots in the 1987 OBRA Omnibus Reconciliation Act. It was there that it was that effort to deinstitutionalize nursing homes. It was where they really wanted to say that the highest practicable level of well-being was important, that we needed to know the individual, and we needed to really do everything we could to address not their physical needs, but their psychosocial needs. In 2007, as culture changed to the an alternative through the Pioneer Network coming around, Commonwealth Fund funded a survey to see how many people had really adopted some elements of culture change. 56 nursing homes self-reported doing some type of culture change. In 2009 to 2010, another survey was done, and that number went to 85%. I found it very interesting that in 2010, CMS and the Affordable Care Act, through the interpretive guidelines and mandates and incentives, were created to really support and incentivize culture change. As you know, the Affordable Care Act, I would say, really focused on what are we doing to improve quality while lowering costs. You could broadly say that culture change is defined in these 6 principles, really looking at a home-like environment, really focused on the person from a care and activity perspective, looking at staff empowerment, thinking about collaborative and decentralization of management. It's all about relationships among the staff, family, and residents, and really having a continuous quality improvement process in place. But with all of that, when I think about the most significant innovation as a nurse that has hit long-term care in the last 20 years, for me, I have to unequivocally say it was the greenhouse model. And it's no other time, no other innovation has so comprehensively and radically changed the paradigm as the greenhouse model has. I call it a radical ripple. When those first 4 greenhouse homes opened in Tupelo, Mississippi in May 2003, I believe long-term care has never been the same since. I heard about the greenhouse model at the time it was an ASA conference, and it rocked my world. I was currently working in a traditional CCRC, and I heard about greenhouse, and I said, that's my home care world and my long-term world coming together. It's beautiful. I want to know more. So interestingly, in 2010, with regards to culture change, we went from those first 4 homes in Tupelo to celebrating the opening of our 100th home. Provider Magazine wrote an article and pretty much referred to us as the pinnacle of culture change, really representing, again, that radical comprehensive transformation. Here's where we are today. Let's make this map green. We've got 30 states that have open greenhouse homes. You'll see the 2 in gold. It's Nevada and Vermont, where we've got projects in development, along with a host of other projects in those green states. So what have we learned? When I think about almost 15 years of greenhouse, what have we learned in the process? And how has that learning informed some of the new ways of doing our work? I think the first thing that we've learned is while greenhouse it seems to me everybody focused on the small house, we have learned that the Greenhouse Project is not simply a small house movement, but it's a movement instead that deinstitutionalizes, destigmatizes, and humanizes care for elders, ensuring that all elders live life. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. Another thing that we've learned is that it's a cultural transformation process. I said in the previous slide that it's to ensure that all elders live life. And so you can't focus on the change that will occur when you open those greenhouse homes, but that the culture must be transformed across all parts of the organization, and that it is a process, and change must begin the moment our work begins in contemplating greenhouse. So what is specifically the greenhouse cultural transformation? As I've used these 2 words quite a bit, and I will continue to use them, it is a radical paradigm shift. And when I say paradigm shift, as a nurse who has spent so much of her career in this space, I can tell you it is a shifting of a paradigm, and it's radical. The next thing is it is comprehensive change. I think in my tenure, I have really noticed that we can often go the path of least resistance, and that is really taking an incremental change approach. And what can I do without ruffling too many feathers? What can I do that will be quick enough, easy enough to make something happen? And I can tell you that it's comprehensive, and it really involves looking at these three elements: the philosophy, the organizational structure, and the physical environment. So cultural transformation has to begin, first of all, really understanding what those greenhouse core values are. It's looking at real home, that physical environment. It's looking at meaningful life. You can build a small structure, a beautiful physical environment, but what philosophical culture will you move into that physical space? So meaningful life denotes that philosophical culture that will fill the physical environment. And finally, it's the organizational redesign or empowered staff that really makes that house a home and really brings success. So let's unpack it one value at a time. Real home. This is a picture, one of my favorite pictures of a greenhouse living room. It looks like a living room that could have been in perhaps one of our own homes. You see intergenerational activities happening. You see a child on the floor in a skilled nursing environment in front of a fireplace, doing what I would call a very normal activity that could have occurred in perhaps one of our own homes. So what is real home? Is it the same for everyone? When I say real home and I describe what's important to me, would it look the same and would it potentially feel the same as yours? So in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, this is New York City, there is a high-rise. This is an envisioned project for the new Jewish home. And if you think about where most people have lived in this type of urban environment, you're going to expect a high-rise. You're going to expect apartment-style living. But if you are in Seward, Alaska, I'm thinking you're going to have a very different experience. It's going to look different, and it's going to feel a whole lot different. So single-family homes, this is another thing we've learned. When the first 4 homes opened in Tupelo, Mississippi, everybody envisioned home is a single-family home. And so most greenhouse homes currently are the single-family style of home, 10 to 12 private rooms, and you can see it looks very much designed to fit in it's similar to the surrounding community. This happens to be a suburban area of Birmingham, Alabama on the left, and on the right, you've got Janesville, Minnesota. But what was important in those particular environments is that elders still had access to the outside. So they've got lovely screened-in porches there so that elders are able to feel the fresh air, to get outside, to be able to experience access to outdoors. An urban environment. So this first began, Leonard Florence Center for Living really did challenge us somewhat to think about what home was like on the outskirts of Boston. And they said, for us, I hate to tell you, it's going up. It's apartment style living. We have a postage stamp size lot, and this is what would be important to us. So they've got 2 greenhouse homes, 10 elders on each side of an elevator bank in the middle. And so that elevator bank has a space outside the elevator, outside the front door of the home, for elders to kind of sit and wait for the elevator or sit before they go inside. And they have some beautiful windows and natural light for elders to just sit outside their home for a while. This is John Knox Village in Pompano Beach, Florida. They've got 12 greenhouse homes, 12 elders in each home. They've got a wonderful first floor with a bistro and a wellness spa, a community arts area, so lots of different community spaces for them. And for their community, this was the right size and the right style going vertically for them. So right now I'm going to pause for a minute and we are going to show you a video. Once again, I'll remind you that the audio will come from your computer screens. If I could, I would take you inside a tour. Because we cannot physically do that, we're going to do a virtual tour of homes that just opened in Providence, Rhode That's one of my favorite places to visit. I love the architecture. To me, it feels like they have really been able to incorporate some of our lessons learned with regards to architecture. But what if you don't have the land, or you are capital constrained and being able to really build greenhouse homes? Or what if you are wanting to make some changes in your legacy building as you are building your greenhouse homes, because not all of those beds will go into your greenhouse community. So what does real home look like in legacy spaces? And we've created a design guide to really think about what do those core values look like in a legacy environment. And speaking from a physical environment, we prioritize our values, and we have kind of defined it in this way. First of all, we look at scale, and we say, how small can we break down those households? Smaller is better. Can we get it to 10 to 12 elders in each household? Or how small can we get it? What about the hearth? Can we create that space where there's a kitchen, living, and dining area, where it really just invites people to congregate and to really be able to build intentional community? Privacy is important no matter where you are. So what can we do to bring privacy and have as many private rooms as possible in that space? And what about a front door? There is nothing like a front door differentiating my home from your home, one household from another household. And to really think about how do we create these households to be autonomous, functioning independently and separate from one another. So instead of thinking about it as a whole, all of the units, to really think about each household. And what about staffing for each household? What does that look like? So that is real home. Let's take a look at meaningful life. I always say, when you understand meaningful life, it's best told through a story. This happens to be Oda, one of my favorite stories. Oda moved into her greenhouse home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She moved in on hospice. She was given less than 6 months to live. But in her greenhouse home, the core value of meaningful life got lived out through deep, knowing relationships. The care partners or Shabbasim that were supporting Oda, they discovered that Oda had grown up on a farm in Iowa, that Oda loved to garden. She especially enjoyed flowers. So it was really interesting. The care partners would bring Oda outside to get fresh air, and before long, Oda was climbing out of her wheelchair and into the flower beds to tend to some flowers that needed to be, I think she called it deadheading. So Oda lived another 3 years, very happy, content, an incredible quality of life in her greenhouse home. So what is meaningful life exactly? Let's start with person-directed care. This is a wonderful handout that was created by I think I received it at a Pioneer Network conference one year, and I love this diagram because it really describes how the degree of person-directedness has evolved over the time, beginning with the provider-directed model, where management is making most of the decisions, residents are accommodating staff preferences, and everyone's expected to follow the routines of the facility. Next, we became more staff-centered. Staff consulted residents when making decisions, but ultimately, residents were expected to accommodate staff's decisions. Finally, that evolved into person-centered focus, and you'll hear a lot of buzz on person-centeredness, and it's wonderful because it really is looking at the resident and the resident's preferences. Decision-making is all about who that person is. Care is centered on the person, and staff organize themselves to accommodate those preferences. Person-centered, person-directed. What is the difference? Person-directed obviously means that somebody, the resident, is making decisions. It's not just centered on me, but I am actually having more autonomy and control to direct my life. What a difference that is. In greenhouse home, though, really leveraging that meaningful life and to really think about what it is in greenhouse homes, it's all about relationships. Relationships that become relationship-rich, elder-directed living. So the words that have changed, it's all about relationship-rich. And it's that deep knowing that enables an elder to direct his or her, not just care, but his or her life. Relationship-rich, elder-directed living. The third core value is empowered staff. I think this is probably the most challenging to operationalize. I have coined a phrase, it's all about leadership, and it really truly is about leadership. So what does it mean to have an empowered workforce? How does it happen? It's all about leadership. And in the greenhouse model, it's really all about a coaching approach to leading change, a coaching approach to equipping leaders with the coaching and communication skills to be effective at inviting others in to problem solving and decision making, ensuring that the teams have all of the support, the supplies, the resources, everything they need to be successful, and holding them accountable for that success, for the outcomes. Empowerment requires intentionality and really creating a flattened hierarchy and really making sure that the elder is at the heart of the organizational chart. Again, you can't have relationship-rich, elder-directed living if the elder is not at the center. It's not the focus of everything you're doing. But in addition to that, it's about redefining everybody's role and responsibility. It's about consistent assignments. It's about consistent care teams. And it is, once again, about that radical change in leadership, really moving to a coaching, participative, decision-making style of leadership. I can tell you as a former director of nursing, that's not exactly how I was schooled. It wasn't exactly how I functioned in my role as a director of nursing. So education is obviously a bedrock. The Shabazz, if you go back to that organizational chart, you will see the Shabazim are those working closest to the elder, and that is kind of the heart of the greenhouse model. They work as a self-managed work team, and to the point about leadership, it really requires leadership to empower, to trust, and to provide all the resources necessary for this team of Shabazim to be successful. These Shabazim work collaboratively with the leadership team. And because they are working in a versatile role, they organize themselves in coordinator roles so that they're able to ensure high-performing teams, that team coordinator, making sure they're doing all the self-scheduling. The care coordinator is in collaboration with MDS coordinator, nurses, and anybody else who needs to be involved so that quality care happens. A housekeeping coordinator to make sure cleanliness is monitored and maintained, and a food coordinator, making sure preferences are honored for elders, making sure temperatures and weights and everything that needs to be done for skilled nursing is accomplished. Empowerment through education. That direct care staff, we start with CNA as a foundation, and then there's 128 hours of additional training. You can see kind of the breakdown here. If you're expecting them to cook, then it's important to have a culinary program that equips them for success. If you're expecting them to be household managers, then what does that in-house training look like that will support them for success? And then 48 hours of greenhouse-specific training. Nurses in a greenhouse home are vital. And it's not, nurses, just go do what you've always done. Your role doesn't change. No, your role changes tremendously. We've kind of developed curriculum that really defines the nurse's role, how the nurse is a care role model, modeling what does person-centered, person-directed, relationship-rich, elder-directed living look like. A gerontological expert. What does it mean to be an expert, to practice a specialty in the field of gerontology? What does it mean to be a care partner? How do I, as a nurse, partner with Shabazim, each bringing our respective skill sets to the table with the elder at the center of our focus and attention so that we are in care partnerships, ensuring that the elder is living their best life and receiving the best care possible. And as a nurse in a greenhouse home, you're a mentor, you're a teacher, really equipping that self-managed work team with skills, not to practice outside the scope of their practice, but to really be able to be equipped with more knowledge that will support the early detection and everything that would be essential to provide high quality care and good life. Here's the staffing for greenhouse homes. We've got, for nurses, 1 nurse for 2 houses on days, 1 nurse for 2 to 3 on evenings and nights. For Shabazim, 2 on days and evenings, and 1 overnight. Here's another thing that we discovered. When we looked back at some research, we discovered that 85% of elders living in greenhouse homes were living with some form of dementia. So to us, it said we need to do better. If 85% of the population we are serving in greenhouse homes are living with dementia, let's develop a best life approach, building on our core values, adding core components, culture, meaningful engagement, health and well-being, and identifying and building on core principles. We will have a webinar series that will unpack the best life approach to dementia, and check the website for information on that. But I kind of sum it up. Take a look at this elder. And when you look at this elder, what do you see? And I think for most people that I show this picture to, most people, they say they see a woman that looks very comfortable. She's got her stuff. She's reading. She looks like she's pretty content and pretty happy. This is a woman that is living with significant memory impairment, but we see her and not her disease. We see her and not the diagnosis. And we call that, it's a principle of best life, the power of normal, normalizing our environments, normalizing our approach so that we see the person before and above the diagnosis or disease. So achieving success in greenhouse homes, we have learned it's as simple as living the greenhouse core values, really building those deep knowing relationships, leadership, really establishing a coaching culture, creating those conditions for empowerment that will fully empower the self-managed work team, and that physical space or real home, and creating the power of normal. But it's not enough to implement well. In this day and age, I can tell you one thing is for certain: data matters. And really capturing and identifying the metrics for success to sustain change is especially important for greenhouse. And so we've got a tool, it's called Merit. It's a Model Enrichment Resource and Integrity Tool. And that is a tool that monitors and manages how well each open greenhouse home is living the core values. It is done annually so that they can compare themselves, how well did we do year to year, and how well are we doing by comparison to other greenhouse homes, providing yet again another opportunity for us to leverage learning and to be able to learn and grow from one another. One thing that I always appreciated as a nurse was the evidence base that was associated with greenhouse. It didn't just look good, but that there was the greenhouse model had subjected themselves to the rigor of research, if you will. And starting with the very first study that occurred down in Tupelo, Dr. Rosalie Kane did this study and discovered that resident and family satisfaction improved, the quality of life. Well, of course, we expected that to improve, but actually the improved quality of care was there as well. They were really happy and pleased to see that there is higher direct care time. This was a subsequent study. I think that the thought was, well, if they're doing all these other tasks, the concern that we were compromising on the direct care and engagement. And in actuality, they discovered, no, actually there is more direct care time and increased engagement with elders and improved care outcomes. I found that intriguing and wondered what they attributed it to. And when you take a deeper dive into research, you will discover that the amount of time in a traditional building that a CNA is spending transporting elders to the dining room or elders to therapy or elders from one point to another, that time is a real time buster, if you will. And so in greenhouse homes with those smaller spaces, they are much more able to engage with those elders, and the time that they are with them with care and so forth, even cooking, they are able to engage elders. Impact on workforce, and I mentioned early on at the beginning of this webinar that we will have a whole series on workforce. Workforce is we will have some challenges in the future, we globally, and I think it's time for us to think, what are we learning from greenhouse? And we know from research that there's improved staff satisfaction, that it's reported less stress, and that we know in greenhouse homes retention is higher. And we will do a webinar to tell you all about recruiting, retaining, and how to keep folks engaged in greenhouse homes. This was an interesting study about nurse and Shabbos-im relationships in a greenhouse home. There was a time that nurses in greenhouse history, this is probably back in 2011, that nurses were rather uncomfortable, the nursing profession was rather uncomfortable with the idea, it felt like a pendulum shift, and that the Shabbos-im were now empowered so much to the point that they were concerned about who's really providing the care oversight. And will care really remain as good in a greenhouse home if nurses are somewhat removed from the equation, which was the perception. So when they looked at these nurse-Shabbos-im relationships in greenhouse homes, they found variability, and they found 4 different types of ways that it was manifested. I'm going to start actually on the right-hand side, because that was the one they saw only in one community of greenhouse homes. And this is where the nurse was really perceived almost like a visitor, that there really wasn't much collaboration between Shabbos-im and the nurses. There were very clear boundaries. Nurses, you were out. You're the visitor coming in. And Shabbos-im, we are pretty much in charge. So there really wasn't any nurse oversight for non-nursing duties, and very little to no collaboration with regards to care processes. Shabbos-im were really directing things. They were really kind of making decisions that were borderline going outside scope of practice. So the traditional, moving over one, this for me really felt like business as usual. It kind of felt like, well, yeah, this is kind of what we did in the traditional building. It's what we're going to do here. So nurses were making most of the decisions on care, including making the assignments. There were definitely clear boundaries. I'm the nurse, you were the Shabbos-im. Nurses had oversight for non-nursing, and the care processes were all very much nurse-directed. So nurses were pretty happy about this. For them, not a whole lot had changed, and they certainly liked their environment. Shabbos-im, on the other hand, felt very disappointed, and they really felt that things hadn't changed so much, and they had expected far more in a greenhouse home. Parallel, I kind of refer to this as kind of the siloed approach. And Shabbos-im were reporting to nurses for clinical issues. There was some communication between them. Nurses did their thing. Shabbos-im did their duties. Not much nursing oversight for non-nursing duties. Care processes were very much nurse-directed. And I think both had high work-life quality. And last but not least is the one that we really aspire to, and it was seen in many greenhouse homes, and that is the integrated, where nurses and Shabbos-im are working in highly collaborative, reciprocating, communicative relationships. The boundaries were blurred. It was reported that there would be a time when a nurse would come in to do a med pass and an elder needed to go to the bathroom, and so the nurse would take the elder to the bathroom. Or maybe another time an elder was in the kitchen wanting a cup of coffee, and Shabbos-im were busy doing care, and the nurse would fix a cup of coffee and sit and talk to the elder for a while. Care processes, it was very collaborative. They figured out what needed to happen from a care perspective together, and both reported high work-life quality. Moving on, consumer research. In 2012, some research was done among about over 1,000 informal caregivers. They were shown a 4-minute video about greenhouse. None of them had ever heard about greenhouse, but what they saw, then they were asked questions about through focus groups, through a questionnaire and so forth. And the response was overwhelmingly positive. 97% said, overall, this is an incredible thing. 78% said, I'm definitely interested. And 60% said they'd be willing to pay more. 73% said they'd be willing to drive more. And what tested most positively, they really loved the comprehensive training, the advanced staff training that was there. They loved the home, the way the home felt. They loved the ratio of caregivers to elders. And that small layout just made them feel so comfortable. So Thrive was the most recent research that was done, and it was a longitudinal study that occurred from 2011 to 2014. Thrive stands for the Research Initiative Valuing Elder Care. And what they did was they conducted a series of interrelated research studies on the model and compared it to traditional nursing homes. The researchers were from Harvard Health Management Strategies, the Institute for Clinical Outcomes Research, University of North Carolina researchers, and University of Wisconsin, and the Pioneer Network. So the purpose of the study that you have on your screen right now was to develop a conceptual model examining care processes employed in greenhouse homes, wanting to compare those processes with higher to those with lower hospital transfer rates, and looking at what are the care processes associated with the greenhouse model and the differences between care processes found in greenhouse homes with high hospital transfer rates to those found in greenhouse homes with low hospital transfer rates. So looking at the that diagram that's there, the select greenhouse elements, it really was those core values: real home for the physical layout, and meaningful life, or that culture of building deep knowing relationships that contributed to increased frequency of interaction among care teams and greater familiarity with elders. Those elements then created significant opportunities for identifying, communicating, and responding early to changes in an elder's condition, which, as we know, those are all the things that matter most when you're talking about reducing hospitalizations. Unfortunately, this is where there was variability among greenhouse homes and how those opportunities were leveraged. So staff in the low transfer rate greenhouse homes, they engaged in care processes that maximized or took advantage of those opportunities created by the model. Staff in the high transfer rate greenhouse homes did not. So, for example, physicians and nurse practitioners in the lower transfer rate greenhouse homes, while only one physician in one of the 3 higher transfer rate homes described the Shabazim as a valuable source of information because of their high familiarity with the elders. And they thought that they were an important conduit to good care. And they emphasized the importance of maintaining strong reciprocal relationships with them. Many of them reported that going to the Shabazim, that's who they needed to go to obtain the quality of information necessary to manage an elder's care or change in condition. It's all about leadership, really making sure that that's happening. The small physical layout of greenhouse homes created great opportunities for interaction. They described it as kind of bumping into each other in that common area, that hearth area that you saw in the video. It literally brought people together who would otherwise only occasionally or maybe never interact. So, for example, physicians and nurse practitioners described bumping into the care staff and even family members as much more likely with the layout of greenhouse homes, and that gave them the opportunity to have informal conversations. It gave them opportunity to get to know each other, exchange information, and develop more intimate relationships with families, which gave them better information to really inform where they went with regards to care and whether or not they would go into the hospital. Greenhouse homes with high transfer rates generally failed to maximize these opportunities, and in some cases, they really literally undermined them. So everyone identified greater familiarity with elders and more frequent interaction as important benefits. There was no one in the high transfer homes that described strategizing about how to maximize those opportunities. So I guess this really showed us once again that what must we do in our education and training to ensure that our care teams, that nurses and Shabazim, that we are building on the lens of research to help care teams, nurses, physicians, leaders be able to really understand what must we do to maximize opportunities to effectively communicate, because we know that that is a decreased time to treatment, and that means lower hospitalization rates, and end of life was typically in a greenhouse home. Once again, if we're looking for a model that improves quality while lowering the cost, this shows us that there is opportunity in this model in achieving that. Sustaining greenhouse homes. This was a study that was really focused on what is it about the greenhouse model that will erode or reinforce? What are the principles and practices in greenhouse that is bringing a reinforcement or erosion? So once again, there was some variation among greenhouse homes. And in this study, they observed 3 different types of patterns of problem solving. I'm going to talk about the coached collaborative there on the right-hand part of your screen. In this pattern, problem solving is really a team approach. The guides and other members of the clinical support team mentor and support Shabazim so that they are able to kind of analyze problems and devise and test solutions. The other management-led, that is where managers are making most of they're kind of identifying which are the problems to be solved, and the process of problem solving is really management-led. And while the outcomes might be consistent with those practices, it kind of was a mixed bag, because it really wasn't equipping these Shabazim with greater skills to be able to solve problems. And last but not least, hierarchical is probably as you would imagine. It was very top-down, management-led, management meaning that they were coming in not totally supportive of greenhouse necessarily, and the problem-solving process as well as the solution was really divergent of greenhouse principles and practices, leading to erosion. I'm not going to unpack it anymore. We are going to do a subsequent webinar that will really help you better understand some of this that is so incredibly important to understanding cultural transformation. So let's talk about cultural transformation. And the first thing I want to say, it's a process. It is not a task. It is not a series of just check the box education and get her done, but it really is transforming and changing the way you do things. I think the thing that we have learned first and foremost is that we have to discover and uncover the traditional beliefs. It's our mindset. What have we believed, and what has our mindset been about care, about abilities of elders, and how must those beliefs and mindsets change to inform a new way of caring? I think culture change has often been the quick fix behavioral approach. And what are the behaviors that need to change? And let's just throw some education at them. But instead of, let's start with our beliefs and our mindset that needs to change. And then let's go to the behaviors, identify the behaviors that were reinforcing traditional beliefs. What needs to change based on the new beliefs and mindsets? And finally, what are the systems that must change? If you're not changing the underlying system, your behaviors will erode over time. But instead, you must take a look at the systems that support the new beliefs and behaviors. So sustaining change takes a lot of effort, and cultural transformation we have devised into kind of a phased approach. This is just very quickly some research that we pulled from forum, we kind of went outside the industry to think about change and behavioral change, what makes it stick. They defined it in these 3 phases. They asked the groups, where have you committed organizational resources? And no surprise, most people, 60% here, said that 60% of their dedicated organizational research was all about equipping. That's where the education, the training typically happens. When you think about setting the common direction, a vision, only 20% there, or sustaining the ongoing support and reinforcement, 20% there. And I think that's probably true within the culture change space. I would, based on my experiences and knowledge, I would say that's probably true. Here's the interesting thing. Where is the greatest impact? And impact, 34%, and equipping only 10%. So 60% of your time, but only 10% impact. And for sustaining, 55% is where you're going to have the most impact. So building from what we've learned from the forum research, we devised 4 phases. We've added assessing to really kind of get in and try to figure out who the organization is and develop and customize a plan and path forward. And then taking those other 3 phases, we have really created a roadmap for success so that you can do cultural transformation in a way and achieve far greater success. I'm not going to spend time unpacking this because there's a lot there. One of our subsequent overview webinars will be all about cultural transformation, and we're going to really spend our time taking a look at these phases and really trying to understand what it is and what would the path forward for you and your organization possibly be. The greenhouse difference. So for me in my life, there was a day that I told you I went to visit Tupelo, Mississippi, and I was so impressed with what I saw there. The organization that I was with, we determined not to do greenhouse, but we did something like greenhouse. So it was important to me over time to really kind of determine, so what is the greenhouse difference? And why is it important to think about greenhouse? I joined greenhouse in 2008. So I've been with the organization about 10 years. And here's kind of what I've put together as what I believe are kind of those 5 reasons that greenhouse is different from other culture change initiatives that I've known about. I think reputation, with all the media hits, just recently a New York Times article, the greenhouse is really a recognized thought leader in the field. We often get, it's kind of the Kleenex of culture change, if you will. Many times I think people are saying we model after greenhouse because greenhouse is kind of, again, that pinnacle. Research, we have been fortunate to, I say fortunate because when you're subjected to the rigors of research, you never know exactly what you're going to find. And they found all sorts of things that really has enabled us to learn and to grow, to adapt, to change, and to really start to define and determine the evidence base and what really makes change meaningful and what really makes change meaningful for elders and for the staff that support them. Education and training is not on here, and I'm not sure why it's not, but well, anyone embarking on culture change would certainly offer education and training. I used to say education and training was our secret sauce, and boy, I come so close to saying it is the secret sauce, but it really is the interplay of everything else. Our education and training has evolved tremendously over time, and we have incorporated the lessons we've learned along the way, the lessons we have learned from research and from our merit tool now, so that our education just becomes more and more robust and more appropriate to leveraging, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel, if you will, and you are really able to learn from those who have gone before you. Project management. I think leading cultural transformation process really requires a skilled guide or a coach. You want someone that can help an organization navigate out of the comfort zone, if you will. and support the organization as you encounter, inevitably, the challenges of change. And project management really helps you address the architecture and design support, the regulatory support, as well as to be kind of that support along the way with education and training as well. And last but not least, the peer network. Probably the most differentiating is the network of organizations that comprise the Greenhouse Project. I call them my community of thought leaders, so that it's not dependent upon just what I see, but it really is leveraging the learning of everybody that is a part of doing Greenhouse. So everybody's got a different perspective. Our Greenhouse partners, those that have taken the Greenhouse model, they are the ones that really are the heroes. They are doing it day in and day out and really helping us to leverage their learning and their experiences. And sustaining change, sustainability, obviously, I spoke earlier about our model fidelity tool, Merit, and really believe that this is a tool that really, really, truly helps organizations not just implement well, but to protect the investment in that change and to sustain change for over the years. The model is attracting global attention. For the first time, we invited a handful of countries to our annual conference, and we will be kind of encountering what does Greenhouse International look like. And finally, I leave you with the quote that we started. I hope that you heard something today that will inspire you. I hope you heard something today that may be even challenges some of your assumptions. But whatever you heard, I hope that it will challenge you to do one better and to think about how 2018 will be a year that you are going to do something different, something better, and really embark on your own culture.